Calm the frustrations. I understand. But
So this actually leads into our next topic well, because I've always said the Lions' worst enemy and biggest opponent has been officiants and officials in the NFL. So we have Mike Pereira. He joined the Greenlight podcast to talk about some officiating rules in the USFL. And again, shout out to @NewsUSFL on Twitter. If you're not following them, sign me up. You know, I think most people just assume that everybody in the community hates each other, but the USFL community has been pretty cool so far. I want to see them grow. So there's no hate from our side. Make sure you give everybody a follow from our den, USFL, News USFL. This is the USFL. There's so many to name off, so I don't want to keep going because people will get mad that I didn't list them off. But shout out to him for bringing this up, because honestly, I may never run into this, you know.
Well, and I listened to that section because they talked to Pereira a while. Like it's the longest portion of this show, and you have to catch it right at the end. He only talks for like maybe 3 to 5 minutes on the pieces of this that he brings up, but it's a good snag for what is up there. Like all this stuff is information, but he only like quickly grazes over it. Like these are things we're talking about and doing. I'm like, okay, glad you dropped that in all of a sudden on this.
It's similar to Daryl Johnston joining the Herd last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, where like right at the end he said, "Yeah, I'm out here doing some scouting for the USFL."
Oh yeah,
right at the end.
I remember us talking about that.
So it's similar to that, right? I mean, these guys have a lot to talk about, but we are still getting these nuggets. Again, we saw it from Todd Haley, we saw it from Johnston. Now we're seeing it from Mike Pereira. But we learned a couple things. I mean, more or less, a lot of it I think is probably expected, but Mike Pereira, essentially, he's going to be the rules committee. That's what it sounds like to me. It's going to be what he says, a rules committee of almost one. It's going to be him and probably a few guys. Now, the interesting thing, and this is definitely pulled out of what we saw in the Spring League, 32 of the 35, not 356 if you're looking at my notes, of the officials will be in the NFL developmental list, what they call the next ground up. So this is what we saw in the Spring League. I'm fairly certain it's the same group. I know there were some developmental group for the NFL. I mean, there was definitely pros. There was a few missed calls, like blatant missed calls that time around. But I will say this, again, putting a positive spin on it. I always thought it was fun to watch. I always kind of thought it was fun to watch the official kind of trying to figure out, well, if it's this, and more importantly, the thing that I loved, and maybe this will be Mike Pereira's place in this, because this could be flipping cool. But when we saw in the Spring League, they always had a head official that they would put on the headphones and you could listen to them and say, well, Mike, if this happened, it would result in this, this, and this. But what it looks like is maybe the elbow touched here, but this happened, which results in this, this, and this. Now it's your call to make the final play. Now, I loved that in the Spring League. I mean, some people will probably scoff at the developmental league for the officials. I think it's cool, but especially so if we get that inside look. The inside look is kind of what makes these Spring Leagues a little bit special. They're willing to go beyond the borders of what you normally see.
Access.
Right.
People like to see the stuff that they maybe don't always get a chance to be around or get exposed to. Hell, that's one of the biggest driving forces with the new XFL. If we're talking alternative football right now, they're talking that they're going to crank up the access from 2.0 to like 11 from how they've discussed it. So yeah, everyone likes access. I like how they're talking that it's really Pereira. You think about how the setup's going to be. He said actually on Greenlight that he's going to kind of play a similar role he does with NFL games, where he'll pop in, he'll give his takes on this as well, but he's also going to be really running the rule. He's going to be running the officiating. So you're getting it from the main man on top, explain to you, this is how we're doing this. This is why this is happening. So it's easy. It's assumable that you maybe get to see his process when talking to the officials if it's a replay, because he's going to be right there at the command center. Like he will be doing the command center directly. He talked in the show that he likes it because it's turning back the clock a little to him, because he used to have that role somewhat with the NFL. And so he gets to do that again with a whole new property,
Right.
and get to reinvent some things that he dislikes about the NFL rulebook, or adjust and do tweaks that he feels should be implemented.
I mean, this is one thing that I think fans have been clamoring for is the rule set. It's maybe not as verbally spoken online as some of the big things like the coaches and this and that. But I mean, just looking at my inbox, I get questions about it every week, at least a couple. Hey, are the rules out? When are the rules coming? When are we going to see them? You know, this kind of this and that. So there's going to be a lot of focus on this, and I can't wait to see it. I expect a lot of similarities to, again, the Spring League, which I think was fine. One right here, I think this one was the same. So roughing the passer, hit on defenseless receiver will be reviewable. I think that was in the Spring League, which, I mean, my take, I can't be mad at that. I mean, keep these guys safe. I mean, again, we talked about it. Mike, what the heck is his name? The guy that got his creamed in that initial AAF game, Berkatuzzi. Berkavici. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, oh no. And then there was even a play, I think in the Spring League last year, where there was a guy that I can't remember who it was, but he got his bell rung. He got his bell rung out there. So, I mean, as much to keep these guys accountable, I'm not going to be angry at that. Now, I don't want to become the circus that is the NFL though. I don't want to see flags left and right. So there's got to be a little bit of wiggle room there. I don't know. Thoughts on that?
So something he talks about in this is his interest and his involvement with replay technology. The officiating in the NFL specifically, he's talking about, it's leaned more and more on not just like rule book based judgments or rulings on, say, plays. It's leaning on judgment calls. That's a lot of review. Now, I know this one, it's kind of hypocritical. Well, if he doesn't like as much for the judgment, why are they doing it with this? Well, you can still put textbook on what is roughing the passer, and follow that. Or what is a hit to a defenseless receiver. Hell, hit to the defenseless receiver, that one's pretty straightforward. If it's lean with a crown, if it's way after the fact on a hit, he talked about this where he wants to try and say, hey, if you had a textbook shoulder hit and you got thrown for a reactionary flag, we want to get rid of that reactionary flag. That was the point of the defenseless receiver. The roughing the passer one, it does help with the safety, but I also see the benefit, and I especially like this benefit, it gives power back to the defense.
Right.
Because if you're looking at the NFL, and again, I reference this because they've said they're bringing an NFL rulebook in with tweaks, is how they said it initially. The NFL has gotten more and more protective of the quarterback. Understandable. However, it's almost gotten to an extreme level where roughing the passer can be as simple, and I hate this rule, by the way, it's as simple as if you tap a person's helmet. Yeah. If your hand even touches a person's helmet, I'm slapping you 15 yards. And I completely disagree. There has to be a specific case. If you are pushing someone egregiously way after a play, yeah, sure, that's a roughing. If you slam someone, that's a roughing. If you have direct crown to the head helmet hit, that's a roughing. Tapping someone on the head, come on.
I completely agree with that, because there's so many plays in the NFL. Again, as a Lions fan, I've seen them all.
It's changed games, Stefan. Yeah. That's the thing that's killed me. We're talking, just think about the Chiefs. They could have gone to the Super Bowl a year early if at least that roughing the passer call isn't called on an intercept. Isn't called during the drive after the interception with D Ford offsides, of course. But I digress. Right. That alone would have changed the course of that contest, and the Chiefs could have been possibly walking away with 2 Super Bowls by now.
For sure.
That's the type of stuff they're trying to talk about and prevent. That rule's great. I love that choice. The other one I like that he mentioned, I like both of them. I actually am a fan of, and this one even more is a bit of a more judgment call-y than the other, surprisingly, is they're going to the college style of pass interference calls. Like 15 yards is the base, no matter how far down the field you are. I thought that was kind of cool. And he says in Greenlight, he's kind of been not a proponent of the 40 yards like plus type of plays where it's a throw up type of pass and all of a sudden the field flips. Right. He likes the college rule because it's not as penalizing to the defense. Yes, you have a bad play, but it still forces the offense to still think strategically. You get the 15 yards, but that's not going to flip your game with a snap of a finger. For
sure. And I mean, you see that in the NFL. There's teams that take advantage of that all the time where they know they got a touchy guy out there. Let's just bomb it out there. We might be able to draw a penalty and be 40 yards closer.
Turned around.
Yeah, exactly. So I love to see that. I mean, all in all, again, we had some rocky things to talk about at the beginning, but overall, a lot of things that we're seeing here, going from the two coaches to the hires to even these officiating rules, everything's looking good. There's some things that need to be worked on. We know that. I mean, that's expected with the bare bones, but quite honestly, Mike Pereira coming in as head of officiating shows me that at minimum Fox is taking this serious. It's a household name when it comes to football. I don't know, like my mom might not know who he is, but my dad would, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, that's going to help in itself. And then also just having all that experience, like you mentioned, this is kind of something he's done in the past. It's a little bit of a throwback for him. The dude knows how to put together something like this. And I hope we get, like you said, that NFL rules, nothing too gimmicky, but a little bit of a twist, right? Like, I don't know. The kickoff is a perfect example of like,
we're still waiting on that too.
Right.
That's the other one that, and funny enough, on my appearance with Tom Abraham, that was one thing he brought. I was like, are we hearing about the kickoff? I'm like, not yet. But again, they're close to the vest. They haven't really revealed all the rules. You just got to wait for the nuggets to drop from people that let it go. And I'll even add on this point too, on the same appearance. I do put a cautionary, as much as I do love the reviews, cautionary, because again, yeah, there's textbook, but the flip side I got to address, where if it becomes a judgment play and you see certain call not go away and another refereeing crew's deduction of the said rule, that's a can of worms you're going to be opening up. So the hope is that with Pereira's instance, where he is a guy that says, I follow the rule book. If the rule book says it this way, we have to call it this way. There shouldn't be as little judgment as possible. That's the hope. So just got to bring that in, because that is a point. Like this rule, if it's executed correctly, like especially the roughing the passer one or the defenseless receiver, they're good options. But you have to have the crews that know how to consistently call it across the board, where they're all in the same mindset. You can't have too much variation in what a person's depiction of a rule is in this case.
Yeah. I mean, all in all, things are looking on the up and up. There's a couple things that we got to work on. Not we, but the league. But I think those will get tightened up as we start getting some more of those hires working directly for the USFL. At least we can hope. But like I said, the fact of the matter is a lot of the things that we're seeing coming out of them are top notch. Like, again, like everything you just mentioned with Mike Pereira coming in and all that, like this is a perfect look for the league. And again, looking back at the 3-year plan, I mean, at minimum, it seems like we're at least going to get season 2, hopefully season 3. And by then, hopefully we have the owners of these teams or see what the full plan is. Because, I mean, when we look at the things that we don't know, we know that there's a 3-year plan, but we don't know what it looks like. We know sort of, kind of.
There's still a lot on the
right.
Yeah, there's still a lot on that needs to be put on the table. 85 days. We're hoping to hear that. We should. I mean, they're getting coaches. Just need 2 more. Sadly, we have to say that, but we just need 2 more.
2 more.
Now, give me more details. Come on.
2 more to go. We're gonna get there. Hopefully, we'll get there next week.